BMW isn't new to electrics. In fact, their i3 has been on the scene since 2014. However, what we're talking about here isn't even in the same universe. The BMW iX is the company's first dedicated, ground-up EV, and today I get a chance to show you, thanks to the generosity of my friends over at International BMW. Welcome to the first look at what BMW believes will be their fully electric future, the iX. This isn't some slapdash, half-thought-out catch-up play to offer an EV as soon as possible. This is flushed out, and it feels special and fun. The hot topics you're all wondering about are things like power and range. This is the xDrive 50 trim, which means it gets electric motors on the front and the rear, giving it all-wheel drive. Combined power output from these motors amounts to a whopping 516 horsepower and 564 pound-feet of torque. And all of that is fed from the 105 kilowatt battery pack underneath. And whether you go for the 21 or 22-inch wheels, you still get over 300 miles of range. And to say it's quick is an understatement. 0 to 60 in under 4.5 seconds from something that weighs over 5,500 pounds. And not only that, but the sounds that accompany this thing, incredible. But over 5,500 pounds, yeah, that sounds like a lot, but it could be way worse. What BMW's done here is used a bunch of aluminum throughout the body, and it's also used a huge amount of carbon fiber reinforced plastic, or CFRP, to keep the weight down, and also to keep something very true to BMW's personality, and that's a nice rigid chassis. Sure, this is an EV, but it's wearing the roundel, which means it has a duty to pursue the essence of the ultimate driving machine. And you can't be the ultimate driving machine with weak dynamics, which is exactly why BMW went with the CFRP and aluminum. And the result is something that feels BMW sharp. It's so easy to get singularly focused on things like 0 to 60 numbers or straight line speed in EVs, but if you focused solely on that, you'd be missing the bigger picture here. The batteries are in the floor, so the center of gravity is as low as it possibly can be. This iX is using air suspension that not only allows you to raise and lower the ride height depending on what you're doing, but it also uses the computer to make micro adjustments hundreds of times a second to make sure that the suspension is able to compose that chassis in exactly the way that you or the car thinks is most appropriate for the way you're driving. And then when it comes to turn-in, it's quick, it's sharp, and oh geez. It's very BMW in the sense that it's very dynamic, but there's not a whole lot that comes through the steering wheel in terms of feedback. But it's okay, because it still is a very sharp, very BMW front end. Let's also zoom out and remember that what we're seeing in today's landscape is the first generation of these EVs, so they will undoubtedly improve. However, in the case of this BMW, they've set a very high bar for the others to catch up to. But as a BMW, it has to do the luxury side of things too. We touched on the air suspension and how it'll firm up and sharpen up the car when you want it in sport mode, but this is still a BMW, and as such it's still a luxury car, so they've also tuned the rebound rate of the air springs to ease back when you're in comfort mode. I know every car manufacturer calls their normal driving mode comfort mode, but in this iX it truly is. This car is super nice over mild to moderate road imperfections. The steering is light and easy. The power delivery is smooth. It doesn't snap your neck when you don't want it to, and it's whisper quiet in here. And one of the unsung heroes of a driving experience, regardless of what car it is the visibility. And it's like a fishbowl in here. I can see everything. So it does sporty well, it does luxury and comfort well, but what about efficiency? After all, this is an EV. Well, there's a couple ways that you can go about recouping energy that would be otherwise wasted in an internal combustion car. Of course, we all know one of the main ways is through regenerative braking, and that's been a somewhat touchy subject with me and all of the EVs that I've tested, and it's largely because whenever I get into a car that has regenerative braking or one pedal driving, it's never quite as predictable as I would want. Now, of course, the longer that you live with something, the more that you drive it, the more used to it you would get. But I think that's a really nice way that BMW, or what BMW has done here, is really nice in the fact that they've given you a myriad of options to choose how you want the regenerative braking to step in. You have an adaptive mode where the car will kind of assess you with artificial intelligence and predict your driving habits and give you the regen that it thinks would be best. And you also have individual modes. You can set it to low, medium, and high. And of course, high is closest to one pedal driving. And then if you don't want to deal with all of that fuss, you can just shift from D into B mode, and then you have a one pedal driving experience. When I'm day-to-day driving, I find myself coasting a lot in anticipation of red lights, slowing traffic, and so on. So I would be interested in seeing a comparison of what gets you the max range. Lift and coast with the motors free spinning, or driving with full regen on. But for now, let's step outside and talk about some important details. Okay, this thing is just good behind the wheel. I mean, it's just good everywhere. It's quick, it's sporty, it's dynamic, it's quiet, it's luxurious, it's incredibly comfy. But when we talk about the way that this thing looks, yes, it's the new design language, it has the new grille, and that can be polarizing to some. However, this grille is no more at home, at least in my opinion, in anywhere. It's more at home here on this iX than anywhere else in BMW's lineup. I really like the kind of like graduating triangle design that they have inlaid into the grille. The grille is of course surrounded or topped by this hood, which has the dual bulges like you would see in something like the M3 Twins. It gives it a more aggressive and angular stance. The roundel here on the center of the hood, it comes up and ejects water to clean the front-facing camera, and of course it's circled in the light blue to signify that it is part of the i brand, or it's electric. The headlights themselves, they're a simple LED kind of bar pattern, but it's an advanced, it's very bright, it's very sharp, super helpful. Down here, the lower valence, you have this black, it's not an intake, it's not really a splitter, but it's closed now. It can open to cool the electric motors if they're being driven hard. Around the side here, we have the 21-inch wheels. They're a multi kind of two-tone design with a lighter gray and a darker gray. They're wrapped in Michelin Primacies, and interestingly enough, these are the 21s. If you go for the 22s, you get like a little bit more range. It's only like 10 more miles, but I think that has to do with the tire selection here. This is a good, I think, balance between performance and range. You still get over 300 miles, which is pretty dang good. Around the side, the profile is, there's actually not really a lot going on, which is not something that you could say for a lot of modern cars. The coolest thing to me though is the door handles. They're not like every other EV where the door handles protrude or retract into the door themselves and then electrically come out when you approach the car. I get a lot of feedback from Tesla owners and stuff in the comments saying how in colder climates, like here in Wisconsin, that people's door handles are just not coming out, and then guess what? You can't get into your car. Not an issue with here. C-pillar with the iX, and it's all black painted, and it looks very cool. Around the back, you get a sense of how wide this thing is. It gives it kind of like a sporty stance. But the back is kind of interesting in terms of design because the front is very angular, aggressive, it's very in your face, and the back is a lot softer. You've got a simple LED tail bar. It's not full width, but it does have a nice look. Your BMW roundel on the back here, of course, is still encircled in blue, and you have your reverse camera there. And then of course you have your exhaustless exhausts. But let's step inside. Now, as we get into the cabin here, I hope you can still see me because there's a UV treatment on the front windshield to keep, obviously, the rays off of you and keep you from getting skin cancer and all those terrible things. But the cabin here is really where you start to get a sense of how kind of next generation this car is. You've got a massive dual screen that dominates your experience, and it's running the new iDrive 8 system. Everything, including climate, is now worked into the screen, but they do it in a really smart way where they have the climate menu button at the bottom of your screen regardless of what screen you're on. So it's just one touch to get into your climate settings and you can adjust things from there. Aside from climate though, there's a million ways that you can customize this thing. You can even add widgets to your home screen for stuff that you use most often. There's like a swipe down function for shortcuts, kind of very similar to how you would check notifications on your phone. It all just works really, really well. The 360 cameras in here, as you're used to in most modern BMWs, are amazing, and you kind of can like gesture control and spin around the car if you want. You've also got the breadcrumbs feature, so it'll track you and back up for you if you've maneuvered into a tight spot. So you don't have to worry about that. The graphics themselves, though, are amazing. They're really sharp, they're really strong. The color, even like harsh midday light, is really, really cool. Some of the graphics, especially for like your drive modes, are they're cool enough where I would print them and hang them in my house. The other screen then, of course, is your digital instrument cluster or your gauge cluster, and it gives you all of the same stuff. It gives you all of the information that you could possibly want. It lets you totally customize the look, and then above that is your head-up display. And the head-up display looks like something out of Captain Marvel, at least in terms of the graphic. I know that that's not a good movie, but the graphic is cool. And of course, you've got all the stuff that you would normally look for, like wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. The driver assist system in here is very good. It's not quite Tesla, but it's still very good. But I want to talk about design for a second. Something that I didn't know that I needed in my life was gold accents, and I need them everywhere. Because that's what you have here. They take this otherwise like really black and kind of normal Germanic interior and just give it a sense of specialness, or something that really feels interesting or unique. Especially in the center area where you have things like your gold shift lever and your crystal iDrive wheel, which is wrapped in kind of gold, and then you've got your gold volume knob. It's just very cool. It's some of the little things here that can really elevate the experience. Moving up, of course, your dash is not very deep, which gives you a sense of room and comfort and air in here. It's very low, so you have a good sense of visibility. And then, of course, they house your dual big screens here, which they seem like they're almost floating in place, which is very futuristic, very cool. And then since, of course, this is a dedicated EV from the ground up, you don't have a transmission tunnel kind of eating into your foot space here, so you have a huge amount of space down here. And then speaking of space, the use of space in here is really, really well thought out. Aside from the cup holders, which are not super ideal, but hey, they're passable. Above that, you get this really smart integrated phone holder, which holds your phone up vertically, and there's a hole in it so you can plug your phone in. You got two USB-Cs below. You also have a wireless charging pad below. And then next to it, you have the seats, which are this really interesting kind of like vegan leather type material. It feels good. And they also have a really interesting stitching pattern. I mean, everything in here is just non-conventional, and I think that that goes a long way. If you look directly overhead, you have the biggest panoramic roof that you possibly could have in here, and it's got the cool like electro kind of tinting that you would get from the McLaren GT that we tested last summer. Some other things up front, the sound system is fantastic. All of the sounds that this thing makes as you power it on, when you get on power, and when you turn it off, it's all really cool. And of course, that's the Hans Zimmer effect. He came in and did sound design for the entire thing, which, I mean, he did a great job. And then I forgot to mention, the door release here is a button near the front, and again, you kind of stick your hand into this slot, use your thumb to hit the button, and then it opens. It's electric. Of course, there's a mechanical fail-safe though if your car has ever, completely depleted its battery. And then in terms of the rear seats, they're massive. They have climate controls back there, heated seats back there, chargers back there. The room itself, I think, is the biggest thing. Again, you don't have a drive line coming through the center of the cabin to take up foot space. It's very relaxing, very spacious back there. In terms of the trunk, you have well, first of all, in terms of storage overall, you don't have a frunk, which is a little bit interesting considering this is a ground-up EV. But the fact is you have so much room in the cabin, and the trunk itself is a great size. The load floor is a little bit high, but the actual size is completely usable. So ultimately, whether you're being driven or you're driving, the interior here on this iX is a great place to spend time. And I think with that, it's probably a good time to get into the final thoughts. After having spent a good amount of time with this iX, it's, at least in my opinion, the best all-around car in BMW's lineup today. It's fast when you want it to be, comfy when you need it to be, it's modern, efficient, and super practical. It's a great car and even better EV. So thanks again to my friends at International BMW for letting me play around. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.